So we are going to chat about a wide range of things. And the focus on it is really going to be predominantly around this concept of continuous improvement. Oh, there you are. He's here from South America. Hello, Andres. And by the way, he hasn't yet slept. He came in at 5 o'clock this morning, right? This concept of continuous improvement and how, you know, for law firms, that kind of philosophy around creating a research and development department, constantly focusing on improvement and adaptability hasn't really been a hallmark of where we've been before. But we're about to hear some case studies or overviews of case studies where the folks here on the panel have gone against the grain and really started to lead, I think, in the industry with respect to changing that approach and attitude towards continuous improvement. And then talk a little bit, because we are all about the practical, about, you know, some of the things that have worked and perhaps haven't, and most particularly, you know, their tips for moving these sorts of initiatives forward, because whatever law firm or organisation we're in right now, the ability to be able to move these things forward, to think about things differently, and to help to transform our industry is very much at the forefront, I'm sure, of all of our minds here today. So, Caryn, because, you know, you're next to me, so, you know, I can ask you this question. I wanted to kind of start, and I'm going to ask all of you this question, with, you know, a project that you have worked on that really demonstrates that focus on innovation but continuous improvement.
Sure, thanks Terri. Am I on?
Yes.
I know I'm on. So I lead the legal service innovation team at Gilbert Tobin, and that has multidisciplinary individuals in that, all the way from sort of legal project management, transformation, knowledge management, AI, data scientists and the like. We have been quite focused on innovation at Gilbert and Tobin over the last sort of, well, I would say forever, but ever since we sort of started, which is 32 years ago or so. But we've been particularly focused on it over the last 4 years. And what we've been looking for is opportunities within the organisation on how we actually optimise our own processes and how we actually work better, that concept of, as Terri mentioned, continuous improvement, and then also how we work with our clients in that area. So something that comes to mind for me is we, probably around 3 years ago or so, started mapping all of our matters which were in excess, or which accounted for in excess of 50% of revenue for the firm. So it landed up being about 16 or 17 matter types. And as part of that process, we brought all the lawyers into a room together, as well as our design experts, legal project managers, technologists, so that we did have the diversity of thought, and that's obviously been a theme that has come through quite clearly through all the sessions today, that you really need that diversity to enable you to look at the problems more creatively. So we did that, and one of the processes we mapped was an initial public offer for our clients. And the lawyers came into the room, it's probably fair to say the partners came in there and said, you know, why do we need to be in this room? We have done this a million times before. What are we supposed to learn? But the whole idea was, what we did yesterday is not necessarily what we should be doing tomorrow. And as part of that, we identified an area within the initial public offering, which was verification of large documents. And I don't know if anyone has had the pleasure or misfortune of boxing up a large prospectus. Has anyone done that? One at the back, one of our Gilbert and Tobin lawyers. And, you know, the idea was, and you know, it is still being done like this today. I've done this many times in my life. You basically take a ruler and a pencil, and you take every statement across a 180-page, 250-page document, and you box it up, and you write next to it 1.1, then the next one 1.2. We've definitely got an issue here. Let's try. Maybe it's me. Hello?
No, it seems to be like, okay, if you turn that way. No, turn that way.
Better?
No?
No.
All right. Can you hear okay?
Yeah.
Can everyone hear?
Oh, there you go.
Okay. Okay, we'll deal with the temperamental microphone. So the lawyer said this obviously took an inordinate amount of time. Also for the clients, when they receive their various statements within the prospectus, that they then need to verify as being an okay document. I'm getting rid of this. When they need to verify what is actually in those statements, and they need to attribute it to source material. And the reason why we do that is so you can actually leverage the defences that are currently in the Corporations Act. It wasn't a pleasant experience for the clients, and it certainly was not a pleasant experience for our lawyers. So what we did is we looked to the market in that we have always had the philosophy internally is that if there are products in the market or legal tech in the market that we can leverage to solve a problem that we saw, we absolutely will leverage those, because first and foremost, we are a law firm, we are not a technology shop. However, if there is no technology solution, and 3-4 years ago we didn't see the legal tech you currently see on the market, although actually in this particular use case there isn't, well, that I'm aware of, a great product on the market yet. So what we did is we said, okay, we're going to build this internally. And that's exactly what we did. So we did a minimum viable product use case, or so tested the product. We delivered it quite quickly. It was quite a complex sort of product, and we had to work very closely with our lawyers. So it was really great in terms of embedding this culture of innovation and continuous improvement. Was fantastic for our lawyers to actually be part of the journey. You know, for them, they knew how to actually, you know, work within an initial public offer. They knew how to deliver client work, but they'd never actually been on the journey of developing a product, or for that matter, you know, looking at pain points, then identifying what the solution might look like and actually creating that solution. So we're actually in the midst now of turning that into hopefully what will be a commercial solution. So we've moved on from a minimum viable product that we put into the organisation, worked really well, and obviously streamlined it both from an internal point of view for our lawyers, in that, you know, there were more benefits just than the actual biddable time, because it meant that they didn't have to do a ridiculously painful process of, you know, erasing, lines and then reboxing up, and when everything changed, they can now just do that all digitally. And we've got a portal where clients can now come into, and they can actually verify their statements through the portal, which means they can see exactly what accountability they have in terms of the statements. And we've actually got that as an audit trail sort of later on, that we can go and say, well, this particular statement had this particular verification source, rather than having it amongst a whole bunch of emails, Excel documents, Word documents that just didn't make sense.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Michelle, I was wondering if, in the same kind of vein, you might like to chat with us a little bit about what you folks have been doing in the legal tech space, and also, you know, with iHub as well.
Yeah, so I'm the head of innovation and transformation at Landor & Rogers, and so within that we've got a couple of hubs. So one of those hubs is an iHub, which is our client-facing innovation hub, which we run internally at the firm, and that's kind of in a similar vein, I guess. So that's on a co-design model externally with our clients, and within that I have a team of amazing digital designers, process improvement engineers, transformation consultants, and under that model we go out and meet with clients and work through pain points and come up with solutions to streamline the delivery of legal services. And then externally we, which is new, so in January this year, Landor & Rogers partnered with YBF Ventures to establish Australia's first law tech hub of its kind. So within the space at YBF, just across the road here at 520 Burke Street, we're sponsoring 12 seats effectively. So within that current cohort, which is running until the end of September, we've got 3 startups and 1 scale-up that we're working closely with, and that it depends kind of on each of them, I guess, as to our engagement with them. But we saw that, I think at the time, with going down that path as an opportunity for us to connect more closely with technologists in that space, because again, as Caryn said, we're not putting ourselves out there to be software developers, but I think in my role had spent a lot of time seeing external vendors coming in with their products they'd spent, years and years developing to say, here you go, this is going to solve a business problem for you internally or for your clients. And as those in the room that kind of sit through demos would know, that you often look at those and think, well, that's nice, and it looks good, but nobody's taken the time, I think, to co-design with us. And that's probably at the fault of ourselves as well, in that we probably haven't taken those opportunities to, you meet with them, you see it, you think, yeah, it's okay, but it's probably not really going to do this. And when that kind of flows through into the client piece, then there's three elements of that that's not really working. And I think in those discussions, they're generally not that open to you sitting there picking holes in their software or their development, I guess. And so I think our approach now is to take the opportunity from some of these really bright technologists who are working on solutions and are keen to solve problems within legal, because we have obviously been lagging for a long period of time, and there's probably been more investment within the startup space, within fintech and other areas, to create this community at YBF and support some of these really great startups with amazing ideas, and to bridge the gap a little bit and present them with opportunities within our firm and our extended network, and also opportunities with our clients as well. So as we're going out under the banner of the iHub and looking at these co-design opportunities, having the Law Tech Hub kind of sitting over there that are testing some of the latest technologies that we can also leverage and present them with those opportunities to work with them in a similar environment to what we do. So I sit within the Law Tech Hub every Friday as well, so there's a kind of a continued crossover, and we run pilots internally at the firm. We've recently run a bit of around an engagement piece more so with the lawyers at the firm on, we did a hackathon with our seasonal clerks, so we did that for a number of reasons, but also to give a little bit what we saw in the room next door with Checkbox, I guess, just to see what is possible in a 4-hour window if you threw four problems at a group of seasonal clerks that haven't even practiced law yet, how they could apply smartly legal technology to come up with a solution. So.
Thank you. And let me for the moment continue with the folks in private practice, because Denise, I want to come back to you and look at that from the in-house perspective next. But Rajesh, Rajah Tann has kind of taken a slightly different approach to this in as much as you've set up a separate entity.
Yeah.
So take us through a little bit of that, if you could.
Sure. Well, just for context, what pays the mortgage is not what I do at Rajah Tann Technologies. Is being head of the technology, media, and telecoms practice at Rajah Tann. I say that for a particular reason. I'll come back to it shortly. It's also why we did it the way that we did. What we felt was necessary was the firm was growing at a very rapid rate. To give you some context again, when I joined the firm, we had 40 lawyers. We then grew 10 times, it became 400, and then we almost doubled again. So we are close to about 800 lawyers across 10 countries in Southeast Asia. And when you grow at that rapid rate, what happens is everyone's super busy doing work. Obviously very successfully growing practices as well, but still not having mature policies, processes in place like a large firm would have. And that's a horrendous situation. It's a ticking time bomb that at some point is just going to blow up in our face. And we were incrementally, bringing in directors of knowledge management, director of HR, and trying to move things along, but everyone's super busy just executing, doing work, like what lawyers do best. And about 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, BCG, Boston Consulting Group, came up with a very seminal piece about the changing structure of law firms. And I was told by a good friend, you've got to read this, because we were always discussing, look, we've got these growing pains, and we're growing so fast. We have to leverage off technology, but it's got to be more than that. It's also practice, procedural changes, inefficiencies that need to be carved away, that we've been tolerating simply because we've been profitable, but that is clearly going to chip away when the fee pressures increase over time. How do we execute? Well, the moment I saw that thing, I ran straight to a managing partner and said, we've got to do something like this. He said, well, okay, well done, you do it. That's how it works, right? I was really busy at the time. We had just passed our data protection law in Singapore. Yeah, we were really late in the game, but at least we're there now. That was around 2012 or so. And I said, look, I'm still really busy back then, and we were just cresting in terms of the budget at 2014, 2015. I've got 3 active partners. Okay, maybe I'll take some time off, just a little bit, take the pedal off that, and start looking at restructuring using technology. So we looked at how other firms were doing it, and everyone had very successfully set up innovation teams, innovation champions were in place, and internally procedurally making changes. But we felt that that's going to be hard because I can't even get a partner in the room because 5 minutes and I'm off. There's another client, and billing work always trumps any sort of discussion within a law firm about procedural process changes. They just get the admin person in, they'll sort it out. That's not how transformation needs to be run. So born out of frustration, I said this is just not going to work, at least not for this firm. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a separate unit outside, which will then scare everybody within the firm to want to engage. And that sort of threw a spanner into the comfort level because it was, what's this Rajah Tann Technologies thing? And I needed also to make money, right? Because lawyers is the cha-ching thing, it's rather important to get that part going. So how do you do this? You've got to set up a company and really have rubber on the road from day one. So what we did was we set up the company first, and within 3 months we acquired a very reasonably successful e-discovery team. And e-discovery is still doing fairly well as it is here. Also money-making exercise. We brought in 2 very bright chaps, Michael and Anne, and they've been running from day one, bringing profitability. So unlike some of the other startup projects that some of the other firms have started, ours hit the ground making money from within 3 months. And within a year or so, we hit $1 million in Singapore, which is a decent return. Then people started saying, wait, hang on, okay, so there's some money involved in this. It's not just an expense. How do we get involved? Because this was a time when things were turning. Singapore now is very affected because of what's happening between China and the US. We are bellwether for the economy, so it hits us first and then it hits the rest of the world. So you see Singapore shaking, it means there's going to be tough times ahead for all of us. And so now I've got lawyers who also have a bit more capacity because things are slowly simmering a little bit slower. And then Rajah Tann Technologies really started coming to the fore. We then expanded the offerings from e-discovery to cybersecurity. And so we're in the process of potentially acquiring another team of persons who are hardcore cybersecurity technical experts. And what we do now is whenever there's a cybersecurity event or even on a proactive basis, myself together with Onchi, my cybersecurity chap, would go down at the same time and we provide a full set of services. So it's not just addressing the legal thing with a PwC or Deloitte or someone else taking the chunk of fees away. Now we go down together, and the acid test always is the numbers, right? So I put up my 2 letters of engagement for my corporate partners 4 weeks ago for a project we did for a CII, Critical Information Infrastructure owner, so a fairly large organization. My legal fees was about 55K. The cybersecurity brief was 225,000. So that's how IT guys have been charging all this while. Right? And we're like, well, hang on, but it doesn't end there. For every work product that my cybersecurity guy did, guess what happened? It gets sent to legal. And what does legal do? Send it to me. So my legal fees went up from 55,000 to 115,000. So when I put that up on board, that's when the penny dropped. That this is really something that all law firms need to be looking at, where you can really integrate technology experts together with the legal experts and go to market. But there's one other thing I want to share with you. And when we pitched for this project, we were pitching with PwC, Ernst & Young, and all the rest as well. We had one key advantage, which was legal privilege. And I think we don't really play up the value of legal privilege sufficiently. And that's the other reason why I felt it was an important exercise for us to go to that. And that shocked the system for the Big Four. I got lots of lunch requests after that. So what exactly are you doing with this? So now not just the lawyers, but the auditors and the professional services guys are starting to get a bit queasy. We have a lot to learn from them. I mean, whatever you think about professional services firms, they are masters of process. And so they're turning law basically into another vertical as they have everything else. And I'm sure they'll do a decent job at it. They're certainly doing a great job in Singapore. I'm sure it might happen here. They've disrupted Europe already. Before that disruption reaches a critical stage, I think it's time for law firms to also look at this model to integrate technology and technology experts to work hand in hand with lawyers and then be able to provide a full suite of multidisciplinary services. In a nutshell, that's what we've done.
Denise, looking at this internally and hearing what these folks are saying, how much of that is ringing true, or do you see the sorts of requests coming through legal departments about improving efficiencies and processes, and how perhaps they want to or are engaging with their external lawyers in the work that you do? Where does that touch any of those points or others?
So we definitely, we are always looking for ways to do things faster and cheaper.
Yeah.
And we expect that from our firms as well. So for us, we're quite fortunate in, when I joined Telstra, my role is to enable the legal team to become more productive and more efficient. And I do that with my team through technology and process. And what we do is and I was actually quite fortunate that when I joined, they had already launched 2 years prior a Legal Innovation Forum, which is a group of about 20 lawyers who come together every 3 months, and they tackle problems that that impact us. And they were quite, they're an incubator for innovative ideas. They test and learn things. They use agile methodologies. And they came up with some really great stuff, but they didn't know when to say, this isn't working, or are we going to get a return on this? So when I came in, I put some frameworks around teaching them how to identify the problem that they're trying to solve, how to identify the benefits, how to do some measurement, and how to understand when if they're not getting a return on their investment, when to say no. And some people didn't like that, so they left the forum, but I also was then able to bring new blood into the forum who has that mindset. And one of the ideas that came out of there was our external spend process. And what we've run a current state process map on that and gathered all the pain points. And then what we're doing later this month is running a future state. And we've asked one of our firms to come in and play the generic firm. And we've brought our technology. So I've got 2 pieces of technology in that process, and I've asked them to join the discussion as well, because I want to build a process, or we want to build a process that uses our technology. Because one of the other issues I had with that innovation forum, which is fantastic and has created this amazing innovation culture, is I have all of these technologies that we're not using. So I did have to rationalize our automation tools. And when we made the decision to do that, we were looking for vendors, as Michelle said, that we could co-design with. We were also looking for vendors that were easy to use, so that when lawyers wanted to make a change or automate a document or create a workflow, they didn't have to come into my team every time to do that and say, hey, can we get this in your pipeline? They could do that themselves. So we've just, I guess I can say this, we just launched Checkbox, which we're quite excited about. And the lawyers love it because it's so easy to use.
Let me pick up on a point that all of you have made or done, and an essential part of thinking and talking about research and development. We've spoken about the culture of innovation, but it seems to me you're also really developing a culture of experimentation, and being open to that, being open to try some different things, and I guess some of them will succeed and some of them won't. But how do you encourage people to get involved with what you're doing when it doesn't have an immediate money tag attached to it, and they've got on their other shoulders, I'm going to speak particularly of lawyers at the moment, the billable hour? So how do you actually get people involved in this? Caryn, should I ask you to address that first?
Yeah. And look, it's not an easy one. It's not an easy one when lawyers' time, they are very busy. They don't have that time to devote to a lot of projects. I mean, we've used a few things internally, and I think there have been, particularly over the last year, quite a big shift in the market, and to sort of Denise's point in terms of engaging with external counsel, we've seen a rapid increase in the demand from clients for almost like the services to enable their business and to help them look for those efficiencies, look for ways in which you can transform their businesses. And the best way I sort of reflect on this is if I think about the pitch documents we now get, you might have 1 or 2 pages devoted to legal and the legal expertise, because frankly, the clients wouldn't be coming to you as a law firm if they didn't know your expertise. You know, that is almost a given now. It's the what else. And the what else at the moment looks like, 14 pages worth of a pitch document. It's quite an incredible component. So I think traditionally, people sort of say the senior lawyers and the partners are harder to change, in that, they're more used to doing the working the ways they've done it. And, when I reflect on even what Richard Susskind says, I think he always says we probably overestimated what is happening in the short term, but we massively underestimate what is happening in the long term. So most people within organisations still are living in the world of where really we are still not seeing significant change within organisations, but what we might see in sort of 5-10 years looks very, very different. With that in mind, I think clients now, because this is such a focus area, that has been quite a significant shift over the last year. When I reflect about us internally, we now have a consulting capability. Did we go out to the market thinking, when we started working with clients in terms of transitioning their own in-house legal functions, did we think that we were actually going to create a business in that? We didn't. But there was so much demand, and I spent probably 60 to 80% of my time now focused with clients, rather than completely focusing on the internal business all the time, which obviously I've got a big team, so we can still do that. But it has been a market shift. We've also done some other things internally. We have something called Project Invigorate, whereby we've almost given permission to our lawyers to spend time on innovation-related activities. So they get the equivalent time as billable in their performance reviews, and when they go into those performance reviews, the partners do not see whether that has been client work or whether that has been innovation-related work. I think the other thing is there is a recognition internally within firms, and we've certainly seen it, is that particularly the junior lawyers coming through, this is what they want to be involved in. They do not want to spend 5 days a week trawling through documents. It's just not what sort of appeals to them, and really to heighten their curiosity, they want to get involved in that. I mean, we've just launched another one, Terry. We've just launched, well, actually not just launched, about a year ago or so, we've actually had a graduate program where our lawyers go through my team. So we've actually got people sort of, experiencing innovation in the same way as we've experienced, a technology and digital group, or a corporate M&A group, or a banking and finance group. So I think we certainly are seeing the shift, but I think the impetus from the clients is very powerful at the moment in transitioning minds within organisations.
Denise, how are you seeing internally, from your role, the sort of things that Caryn was referring to, that there's much more of a push, and maybe it's coming from you working with your lawyers and almost educating them in a way about what they should be asking. How much are you seeing that from an internal point of view? Have you seen that shift as well, in terms of being more vocal in a way and more articulated about what's wanted?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
When I first joined, my first couple of months, it was like I had all these lawyers ringing me and emailing me going, I've just been to this tech fest and you have to look at this technology because we have to have it. And I'm like, okay, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What do you mean? What do you mean this technology? And I'm like, okay, let's take a step back here. So within Telstra, the legal team are very much about doing things better, quicker and easier. And they're also very much about getting rid of the low-value, non-strategic work. They are very happy to get that automated and to outsource it, just get it off their plate, because they want to play in the high-value, high-strategic stuff. They want to be involved in the M&A work, the exciting technologies that we're involved in, etc. So enabling them to do that is a big part of my role. And getting people involved has not been my issue, which I'm very grateful for, because all I have to do is put the ask out there and I'll get a number of people putting their hands up to volunteer. But what my challenge has been is herding them into the same direction, because we've been so free in our innovation and allowing them to seek technologies, to go to conferences, to go to tech fests, etc. It's been more about getting them in the same boat and rowing in the same direction, which we're almost there. We just launched, or we started working on our, we did an RFP for matter management software, and we just kicked that off in June. And we made a decision as a leadership group that we probably wouldn't go out and ask for volunteers, but we were a bit more strategic in those people that we invited to be part of the project, because we wanted our best and brightest, because this is probably the biggest change technically that Telstra Legal will have undergone.
Thank you for that. Michelle and Rajesh, I want to ask you both this question, and it's come up really from all of you. In order to move forward on a lot of the things that you've been speaking about, working in that multidisciplinary team and really working with specialists in a whole bunch of different areas in addition to law is absolutely essential. But there's always been a lot of silos and kind of quite difficult to break down some barriers in terms of being able to collaborate in that way, to use a term, you know, that you know something about, Nick, you know, we heard about this morning. How do you go about doing that, apart from piquing interest? How do you go about creating peers of people that are working in very different disciplines?
Well, I haven't actually encountered that as being that difficult. I think some of the probably the biggest piece is terminology. I find that, I think particularly being within legal, there's a level of comfort around language, and when you look at some of the methodologies externally and best practice, and I can give an example of that when we talk about experiments. So experiments, we do experiments all the time and have been doing that for the last 12 months, but I've been calling them pilots. So, and I've been doing that quite deliberately because I felt that the lawyers would feel a little bit more comfortable if I was saying we're running this pilot for the next 6 months, as opposed to we're running an experiment. But I just wasn't quite sure the engagement piece was going to be there quite as readily. So, but in saying that, I've actually made a decision last week and I've changed the board. I'm calling them all experiments. But people are seeking out, certainly at Landers, people seek out these people, and certainly within my team. And I've kind of deliberately, because, you know, there's obviously a need more broadly, and we're a national firm as well. And there's a lot to do internally, so there's a lot to do around transforming the business generally and also the work practices. So I've actually positioned one of our process improvement engineers for a 12-month period in one of our key portfolio teams for them to, I guess, see the benefit that comes from some of those different roles that you can have and the skill sets, which is obviously a learning piece as well for them to hopefully continue on with as well and make it a part of their day-to-day operations as well, rather than, I guess, always just leaving it up to those specialties and those fields of people that are really good at, you know, running lean workshops and doing human-centred design thinking, that it just becomes part of their day-to-day work. And I find people coming in and out of groups necessarily doesn't have as much impact as actually just sitting them there for a period of time.
So different language and stealthy placement in offices.
Yes.
Rajesh, how have you folks approached it?
A lot of what Michelle says actually resonates very much with our journey as well. Perhaps I'll just add one more layer to that, which is this morning's discussions on collaboration, design thinking, that really was key for us. Meaning every one of the products created in Rajah Tann Technologies is not created by us in a silo. It's hand in hand. So we bring lawyers and the IT developers in their areas of specialization to come together and co-develop the solutions. And so there's a sense of ownership on the part of the lawyers as well as our IT guys. That's the best way to really bring it onto market. And then if we go further than that, to the actual presentation of the products to clients, because the client relationships are that of the lawyers ultimately. Of course, persons like myself in sort of, we say in Singapore, potong jalan, as in we cut the lanes a little bit. I have direct access, and I use that actually as a strategy, because I then go and tell the clients, look guys, there are all of these technologies, and guess what happens? They then call the relationship partner in the firm and says, you guys, we just met these Rajah Tann technology guys, and they say they can do all of these things. How come we're not using it on the ground? And then the relationship partner then calls me up and says, Rajesh, what have you done? I said, well, guess what? So sometimes you use these sort of tricks as well of the trade to just prod the guys on. And when the relationship partner gets a request from the client like that, then the wheels just start turning. But at the deployment level, it's super important to have both the lawyers and the tech guys sort of going down together to present. Ultimately, these are legal tech solutions. There must be substantively an application of the law and technology coming in to either increase the productivity levels or really augmenting the solution in the case of cybersecurity. So there's two deliverables that come out. And so we do that. It's worked quite well.
Denise, I suspect you're the stealthy placement.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I suspect you're the stealthy placement in amongst all in the legal department. I mean, how does that work for you internally?
Being the only non-lawyer.
No, we don't use that term.
How does it work for me? It's interesting because I've used that to my advantage significantly in how I've led them on the journey that I've led them on to date. I think that bringing in my experience into what we're doing, and that, as I said, they did quite a bit of innovation before, but the types of innovation that we're doing are bigger and broader now. So the stuff that we're doing now goes across all of the teams. And one of the biggest changes that we undertook last year was we implemented a new operating model. And we went from having legal teams that were assigned to business units to practice areas. So instead of being aligned to a business function, you are actually aligned to a practice. So we now have a customer contracting practice. We have a buy, build, and partner practice. And that was a big change for them. And then on top of that, the entire organization was moving to Agile, which was another huge thing. So they had to start learning about Kanban, and they had to start learning about how to be in an Agile world. And how I approached some of those changes, or helping them, not only the leadership team, but also the lawyers adapt to that, is we started to talk about what does that mean for you as a lawyer, and using stakeholder engagement types of tools and methodologies of collaboration, as Nick was saying, design thinking, giving them new things and new ways of doing things to get them excited about it. And I've always said from day one, I am not the subject matter expert on law. I have 150 of you who are going to tell me what it's like to be a lawyer. I bring to the table the transformation and the innovation experience, and I will help you, I will enable you to deliver what you want to deliver, whether that be document automation or a brand new matter management tool.
But that internal communication seems to be such an important piece, because people will come with their own languages from their own specialisms that they're kind of going to have to harmonise at some point to be able to collaborate, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, still I don't understand what a precedent is, but I don't need to.
Well, we can help you over drinks with that. I'd like to open this to all of you. I could talk with these folks forever, but to open it to you, and if you would like to pose some questions to them. So, over to you folks. Thoughts, questions for our folks? Yes, sir.
Kind of an overarching theme that always comes out here is the idea that we're giving ownership to the lawyers or the clients about their problem, like allowing them to articulate it and talk about the solution. But also another theme is that we can fail fast and try things. And I really wonder what happens for you guys when you're there asking people about their problems and then trying to solve it, and you can't solve it, and you move on to your next innovation. How do you deal with the people you empower to talk about their problem, but then are actually left with the problem that hasn't been solved? Because I'm sure that would come up, that this problem you don't solve, but they've now spent time thinking about them and seeing a potential light and then not getting it. It's for anyone.
Yeah, I mean, if I could share, we've not had all successes. There have been failures along the way as well. We treat all of these as learning journeys, essentially. So we never use the word failure. In a sense, it's another experience that we've learned, and then we pivot quickly to the next issue. But you're right, there are times when we just go down a particular road and you're just stuck there. And the problem is compounded when it's not just yourself, but you kind of brought your client down that road together. It might be a service deployment, for example, and both parties have invested significant amounts of time and resources. We had a similar scenario with artificial intelligence when we first brought Luminance into our environment. It's just one of many other players out there. And a lot of promises about how it's going to increase efficiency. Again, my bad, because what I did was went to the client, one of our biggest clients in the corporate M&A team, and said, look, there's this thing that, there's new tools that you should put in place. Guess what happened 2 months later when the bids come up, mandatory requirement, law firm must have AI software in place as a pre-qualification requirement. And that forced my M&A guys to come to me and say, Rajesh, what have you done? And so we were forced to get, and now in Singapore for many projects, if you don't have these tools, you're not even allowed to bid. So we brought the tech in, and that's when the problem started. Because we brought the clients down that road, and we realized halfway through it doesn't work because it won't talk to the virtual data rooms. It doesn't work with encrypted documentation, with documents being taken out, and 4 or 5 extra steps were added on instead of all the time that was being saved. And there was time saved in terms of the raw crunching of data, but a lot of additional time was spent to the extent that the junior lawyers were saying, forget this, I'm just going to download, manually review and put it up. It's going to take me the same period of time. Then download, bring it into Luminous, take it out again, So what did we do? Well, we use it as a learning journey with the client and told this is what we've seen. We very quickly took measures to take out the software and pivoted the lawyers to go back to manual, came back to the firm and did a root cause analysis. What caused this problem? And when we did that, we dug deep. We found the issue was we didn't have a proper nomenclature system in place, right? So a lot of process changes have to happen within ourselves so that we all use the same language with the AI system. When we started changing that part, then it became so much easier. So it was a failure in a sense, but it was a massive learning journey for the firm as a whole. And the client appreciated that fact after a bit of rather expensive lunch.
Caryn,
I think, yes, I think the one thing I would say is I think we think quite carefully around positioning of stuff when you are taking it to clients. And I think, like even if I reflect on like an AI, Luminous, whatever one feels or, how successful those tools are, I think it's about, demonstrating to the clients that actually we might not get you 100% of the way, but we might get you 20% of the way. And that's something that's been very important for our lawyers internally as well. It's not necessarily solving the problem 100%, because frankly, we might not easily be able to solve that problem 100%, but we might be able to get you a 15% more efficiency. And when I tell that to the lawyers, I say, well, you've got one of 2 options. You can either stay where you are at the moment, which has 0 efficiency, or you can go 15% or 20% or 30%. That's your option, but I'm probably not going to get you to 100%. So I think positioning is really important. And my experience with that, both on the lawyer and the client side, is people are far more tolerant of experimenting along that journey then. I reflect, actually 2 days ago, and I think about my verification tool that we have internally, we had bugs this week. I don't know what caused it in the tool, but something caused it in the tool. And it is amazing. We were really concerned for our lawyers who were in the midst of a verification because we were freaking out, like it's not working perfectly. And they were so tolerant, incredibly tolerant, in that they almost felt like it was part of the journey that you go, and because we've had them from the beginning. So I think it's very important, the positioning. But it's funny though, if their computer had blown up or if their Word wasn't working, I don't think they would have been so tolerant. But there's something around the legal tech and the positioning of it which I think is very important.
Is there something also around the lawyer mindset that every time we start something, we expect that it's going to end at 100% plus?
Yep, absolutely. And absolutely, I mean, that perfectionism is something that doesn't really work well for lawyers today in the context of legal technology. But I mean, again, I think that's around the positioning and really understanding the technologies, understanding what continuous improvement looks like. It doesn't look like getting from 0 to 100%. It is continual. It is continuous. Like that is what you try and aim for. But absolutely, it is something that I think the legal industry struggles with, but I think as part of bringing people along the journey with these processes and really embedding this mindset of continuous improvement actually helps them with that. And we've seen massive changes. 2-3 years ago, our lawyers wouldn't have looked at a product that basically wasn't perfect. And now they're absolutely happy to do that and work along with that.
How many of you would say in your firms or organisations right now that there is some initiative, fledgling or otherwise, towards some sort of continuous improvement? We're going low tech, we're doing show of hands. Yeah, okay, so that's widespread, that's really most of you. Yeah, absolutely, that's amazing. Any more great questions for our panellists? Yes, Eric.
It's great to see tangible steps being taken within the industry by law firms to really foster this cultural change within innovation. From a law student's perspective, I know a lot of my friends, as you may know, it's clock shift Hunger Games right now.
That's great.
A lot of my friends are overly stressed, looking for the perfect cover letter, perfect resume, talking to the perfect people, straying away from experimentation and pretty much going a non-traditional route in terms of how to approach things. What can law firms as an industry do collectively together to actually foster that mindset change before the students even step into your law firm as a graduate or as a clerk?
So are you talking about when that, for example, they're doing internships or summer clerkships?
Anything like just before they become an employee, like what can law firms actually do to not only look after their own employees but expand that?
So I know you folks are doing a whole bunch of stuff. Did you want to speak to a few of those examples? Yeah, Rajesh?
Well, actually, the approach we took again to try and think out of the box was to actually engage the universities directly and asking them to change the curriculum and the pedagogy and to accommodate legal tech as part of, maybe not accessible, but an important part of the process. And so from last year, there's a committee that's been set up. I hate committees, so it's a very small committee. People who have decided to start that process, looking very deeply at how you can embed legal tech into the legal training process. And it's very unfair for the young lawyers because they come in and all the partners expect, you need to know how to use this app, you need to know contract automation. Nobody gets taught any of these skills at university level. And I think that would help a lot for the younger lawyers coming in and come right in and fit into the environment where all these tools are now very much in play every day.
Sure.
I think the other thing is to, I think, give yourself more credit too, because certainly our experience recently with the seasonal clerk program that we just ran in the middle of the year was using one of the chatbot automated tools. And so we had the group, there was 14 of them in a room, and we actually started the day off, which, I mean, I haven't had a huge amount of exposure to seasonal clerks through their program, but the first question that was asked of them was, hands up, who's heard of human-centred design thinking? And not a hand went up.
Not one.
No.
Wow.
So I had to quickly...
Mel, yeah.
which is exactly what I did. I'm like, okay, so we might need to just start this off a little bit differently, because I think I did assume for a certain extent that some of them would have come with the basic concepts of that. And so when we were about to throw them 4 different problems to solve using chatbot automation, I was a little worried and a little skeptical and had to thought, well, how are they going to kind of get through this and understand, I guess, what the end result should be based on, running through that type of methodology. But they had 4 hours in that time, and they were put into areas of modern slavery, data breach, quite serious areas, and not areas in which they had rotated through their seasonal clerkships. But they managed to get their head around it, understand the concept of it, and what a law firm would want, and what a client would want as a result of using that product, and build an automated tool to then sit in front of 3 senior judges at the firm and present on it. So I think there's still a lot of work to do, and I think law firms are quite conscious of that and trying to invest as much time as possible through the university programs. And but also I think, given where a lot of the seasonal clerks are and the way they've grown up, it's a bit of a different space, obviously, with technology, that certainly they're able to pick up and adapt quite quickly to some of the technologies as well.
Caryn, I know you folks are doing a lot as well.
Yeah, so look, I spend a lot of time with universities and the deans sort of just thinking about how the curricula can change. Obviously, and I always say this actually to law students as well, is I think given the fact that AI in time will probably take away a lot of the very sort of manual routine tasks, I think it is more critical than ever to have your deep analytical skills, because I think there is a bit of a sentiment in the market now that it's all these other, all these other skills, maybe at the expense of legal. I think it's unfortunately all these other skills on top of having the best legal skills. Because if if I reflect on some of the work that is done by more junior lawyers today, if you strip out, and I'm not saying it's going to happen immediately, but if you strip out a lot of that manual work, it could maybe account for 40 or 50%. That means you're really focusing on high value work from a much more junior level. So I think actually your analytical skills are still absolutely key and paramount to your degree. I think, as I said, there are ways, we sponsor quite a few courses, whether it be generating apps, etc. So we are doing that. We're also, we've had a very heavy innovation focus in the context of our summer clerkships. We don't have winter clerkships, but in Sydney, in Melbourne, obviously we do, and a very heavy innovation focus. Even, the pre-drinks and stuff like that had an innovation focus. So we certainly developed that capability alongside, but again, to Michelle's point, I actually think that what we see, the juniors sort of coming in from universities, are far more equipped to deal with these sort of changes anyway. So, but I would say though, one must still focus on the legal skills quite heavily, and then just immerse yourself in it. There is so much you can read. I say things like, go read Tomorrow's Lawyers by Richard Susskind. Go, there is so much that one can actually sort of learn. Somebody did call me recently. It was a student, I think they were in their second year, quite stressed out, and said, "Can I become a lawyer? I can't code." And I said, that was the comment. And
Join the majority.
But it's true, yeah. And that's it. I think there is a lot of, unfortunately, misconceptions out there, and I think part of that is education. So, I go to a lot of open nights and sort of, panels and stuff in front of uni students, and I think that is important, and some place where law firms can actually contribute, sort of almost demystifying what's out there for university students, because it can be quite complex.
And I'm just going to say, blatant advertising. Join the young legalpreneurs.
Yes.
I'm in it.
Scholars, hands up, here they are. Now, I know there was a question at the back from someone. Yes.
Yes, look, I've just got a question about where your ideas are sourced from, and whether you, from the design thinking perspective, whether you have run ideation workshops, whether you run sort of crowdsourcing type idea generation, platforms, or whether it's more traditional from, a partner has a particular challenge and they've heard of a tool and they come to you and say, can you make this happen? Like, can you talk a bit about, how the successful ideas start up?
Can I add a bit to that, which is how it actually gets from the suggestion and what has to actually make it get to somewhere where something happens on it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Who would like to address that one first?
I'll go first.
Go, Denise.
So as I said about the Innovation Forum, again, our ideas, we do a brainstorming. So there are 3 streams of work that go on. When those streams make decisions that they're finished with what they were doing, we have a brainstorming where the ideas come from. So that group comes together. But so that group is not the only group doing the pipeline of ideas, we do solicit ideas from the lawyers more widely, and from the leadership group. I make them come up with some of the pain points that they want to address, and then I feed those into the brainstorming session, and then we vote on them. And then that's how our ideas get up. And then I think it's important in the forum, the ideas get tested, so they come up with their problem statement, they create their charter and the metrics and everything, and then once they test, they get that idea to a certain point, then we stand it up as a project if it makes sense, which we've done with the external spend stuff.
So did you mention it has to have a budget with it at that point, or no?
No. We've
Okay.
done some incredible stuff using Office 365 tools that has cost us nothing.
Yeah.
Around capability, we're building a capability tool at the moment so that we can identify capacity and capability of our lawyers. We're trying to move to allocating our matters through an automation. So we need to understand prioritization, we need to understand pipeline, and we need to understand capacity and capability. And the Office 365 are easy to learn.
Do you need to have a minimisation of hierarchy within the organisation, so whether it's a firm or Telstra, in order for that to work? so that the ideas don't get knocked out
Yeah.
before they go anywhere, is what I'm saying.
Yes, so that's why I say to the leadership team, you can put your ideas up, but this group's going to vote on it.
Okay.
So don't be depressed that it didn't get up.
Yeah. Sorry, Mick, you were going to say something.
As you're doing more work through it, Denise, are you getting any pressure from leadership to start counting for internal time spent on these things?
Probably less than when I first started it, and that's because we've implemented that benefits and return on investment. So I had a stream present to the leadership team yesterday who wanted to spend some money to bring people from across Australia to do a workshop because they felt that the best way to do that was was face to face. They were fully on board with it. They were fully supportive of it, and the capacity thing. The lawyers can test that themselves, so they can step into projects and they can step out of projects. They just need to let people know. So we've got this rule around if some days you're going to be a driver of an initiative, and some days you're going to be a passenger, and that's okay. But if you're constantly a passenger, then we need you to step out. And it's actually Mick who actually launched the Innovation Forum. So.
I wasn't fishing for compliments.
Well done, Mick. So I want to ask a little bit more on that question, and of all of you actually. But if the dollars are not going to be the measure, not going to be the metric by which you measure success, I want to talk a little bit about failure as well. What is the metric that you use in your organisations to, whatever the right word is, justify, encourage, coerce people to kind of get involved? So, there's the difficulty because there is a billable hour, but if we don't measure it by the billable hour, what do we measure it by? So our innovation, what are the metrics that we use?
Engagement.
Yeah.
About 3 weeks ago, we had a town hall session for all our associates, and our managing partner announced that from 2020 onwards, we're not going to be assessing lawyers based on billables. To which there was a lot of sniggering and right, really? And what we did was then to explain what's going to replace this concept. Well, first, and truth be told, it doesn't mean that billing as a metric is no longer relevant. It is. You have to be a profitable unit to survive in a firm. But that is going to be diminished, and in its place will be 4 or 5 new indicators. One would be contribution to the knowledge management process and documentation and work done in that space. Second is work done in the collaboration exercise I mentioned to you earlier between Rajah Tann Technologies and the firm. Look, the firm is, that company is called Rajah Tann Technologies. It's a lot more than just technology. It's a bit of a Trojan horse. It's the easiest way for me to raise money. So put anything technology, suddenly everything gives you money. But what it does really is look at process changes, and transformation of workflow. So if you contribute to that, you will be able to also add that into your timesheets. Unfortunately, therefore, it means timesheets don't go away, which is, I hate it, but you have to live with that. But what we have done is to reduce focus on client file matters and say, look guys, there's this list of 20 other items here, including pro bono and everything else, that's been there for a long, long time. No one's been keying in any time under that. If you spend more time keying those in, those will now be taken into account in your assessment. It puts a lot of pressure on the partners because it was a bit of a cop-out for us. We could easily just say numbers, below 60%, you can't get anything more than a C. All those objective criteria have to be removed. And it was a very difficult decision. There was a lot of shouting during the partners' discussions. What the heck are we doing? Because the burden on the partner becomes a lot. You don't have to look at all of these qualitative measures to assess whether you have a good or a bad associate. But we think in the longer term, it means we're going to be retaining a lot of very good people who we would have otherwise have lost, purely because they were not able to hit the billing target. So,
very good people
crossed.
with talents that you actually need more than anything going forward. Yeah. Can I invite you more questions?
I just want to build on your question as well, Terri. I mean, for the panelists here, for the law firms at least that I'm familiar with, a lot of you are quite mature in terms of your journey, whereas for majority of the market, at the start of the journey, when they think about investing time and resources into innovation and technology, you get told basically by partners who then say, if I were to invest time and money into a particular technology, it means I'm going to reduce my billable to the clients, and why are we spending money? Any thoughts on that sort of sentiment question?
So
Yeah.
I'm just going to repeat it for 1 second
Yeah.
for the purposes of the video. So Eric, forgive me for doing a very bad paraphrase of this, but basically, how do you get smaller businesses that are not as well as advanced to be able to invest the money when, you know, time is always of the essence and a precious commodity? How do you cut that time out and convince them of the investment? How'd I do?
Yeah.
All right, okay. Thank you, Caryn.
Yeah. Again, it's a really hard one. I think, I actually think being innovative and constantly sort of moving towards this, you know, view of continuous improvement is just another way of doing business today. It is what is acceptable. So I think, unfortunately, we've lost the piece of, you know, do I get returns in there? It's just to keep the business alive, because if one doesn't do it, I think irrespective of size, whether you are large, whether you are small, I think the danger with that is that that business might not be any longer, you know, at some point in time. So I think it is a challenge, but I think, and again, I think irrespective of what the size is of an organisation, I think there is a lot of influence and placed on this by clients. So I think clients are not discerning, irrespective of whether they're large or small as well. I think they are wanting, you know, their businesses, and it's across the board, it's in every industry, to think differently about how they are providing their services to the clients. So whilst it might not be the best way of answering it, I think that level of investment has to be there because it's for survival now.
Anyone from small firms? Yeah. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, this is your world, right? Katrina, what do you think? And if I may, Katrina McLeod, who is the co-chair of the Centre for Legal Innovation Advisory Board from Perth. Thank you.
By way of a bit of background, we have 18 lawyers, and so we would see ourselves as a pretty small firm. I think the issues are effectively the same, just at different scale levels. So the themes coming through today, from persuading management level, whether that's me and my co-director, which is only one, versus a committee of 12 partners, you will still always have the people that are interested in it, committed to it and wanting to do it, and then the ones that are not. So I think it's the age-old problem of bringing them along on that journey, and how and why. I was just joking with my colleague Jamie that my co-director goes away for 5 weeks every year, so every year I tend to bring in a new project, which by the time he comes back he's on board with, because he's really happy and he's relaxed from being on project. But that's a slightly sarcastic version of, although it's true, it is, it's definitely really difficult. We're at opposite ends of career, at opposite ends of openness to innovation technology. To me, exactly what you're saying, Caryn, it's just what is required. Yeah. It's just whether it's my client that owns a $3-4 million house that's falling down, they want to know we're doing things the best way and the most efficiently. And whilst in WA I think we're still a long way behind with client demand, more and more and more, the clients want to know that we're doing it the best way, the most efficient way, with the best tools. And the way I persuade my co-director, the lawyers, the assistants, that all have to come along on that journey is, this is why it's better for you, which I call it future-proofing, and for us all to have a job, for this business to be here, which is exactly what you're saying, Caryn, for this business to be here, we have to change, we have to do things better. And over time, we've had a lot of redundancies, probably over the last 5 years, of, to be blunt, people that wouldn't change and couldn't change. So what is left is other people saying, okay, well, to still have a job, us personally, individually, as well as the business in 10 years' time, there is changes and we have to adapt. But it's slow and it's sometimes really painful, but slowly but surely it's happening. And part of it is recruiting people that are on that same journey, like Jamie here. So Jamie's one of our junior solicitors, and she got the job out of maybe 400 applicants because she had an IT background, project management background, as well as the smarts that are now base level requirement. So I guess that's...
But the point also that you make there, Katrina, which I think is an important one to underscore, is that it is a business issue, but at some point it becomes a performance issue if folks, being given the opportunity, are unable to upskill because this is just a requirement of getting the job done. Caryn, I know that you speak with lots of firms and lots of people. Do you have any thoughts in relation to this as well for, if you like, the small to mid-sized group in town?
Absolutely do, because most of the lawyers that I work with, particularly in that sole practitioner, even in the regions, they're actually some of the best design thinkers. They're some of the best at client experience because they're at the forefront. They're actually dealing with the clients. But it's all by default. And I think really interestingly, what I've sort of observed from today is that, you know, I think across the board, whether you're a sole practitioner right through to a big tier firm, are dealing with the same issues at different levels. But there's probably, when we get down to more of that sort of sole practitioner, sort of smaller boutique, we're not actually defining it in the terms that we're hearing today, but it's systemic, it's something built in. So, you know, I've got a couple of lawyers that I work with in the room, and things like when we talk, you know, regularly about value proposition, about client experience, but we haven't actually coined it as design thinking. But I think as well, one of the freedoms of when you do have your own firm, you can make those decisions around virtual, you can make it around remote, you can be responsive and reactive because often the time it's just you, so there's something quite free in that notion. I think where the complexity comes in is then with the purchase of legal tech, because I think then what happens is that often that's where there's a discord because legal tech can be too expensive then. And I think we haven't at the moment, I sit on the board of Alta, so a bit of a disclosure there, but there hasn't been, it's getting better, but we need to get legal tech that's at that forefront and affordability for these sorts of firms.
Yes, hi Carl. I'll come back to you, Nick, in 1 second.
I would say that the small firms, certainly from a CX and more perspective, have led the charge. From my perspective, the larger firms are only catching up now.
I would say that.
You know, there's some really aspirational, innovative smaller firms, kind of out in one, you know, that have really embraced this because of the types of things that they've been talking about here, the ability to make decisions.
That agility, Nick?
Maybe the same question has been asked 3 or 4 times, but in a different way, or maybe stating the obvious one. But one of the things that is a real driver of innovation, or should be a real driver of innovation, is how it enables or accelerates your overarching corporate strategy. So whether you're a small firm or whether you're a really big firm, there's a corporate strategy. So innovation shouldn't just be necessarily the little ideas that pop up now and then, or we think this is a good idea. If you can show that line of sight to your corporate strategy, then leaders will buy into it. And I guess a question to the folks up on the stage is, I didn't hear anything about how all of the things you're doing are aligning to your corporate strategy. Do you have direct line of sight, and how is that measured?
Sorry.
Well, I do because I've got I have our chief executive partner sitting right in front of me.
In the final session, please direct all questions to.
Can I wait till I go up there?
So I agree with you. I think it needs to come from the top, and obviously all the work that we're doing around that needs to fall in line with what the overarching corporate strategy is. And so I guess timely for us, because we both moved into our roles at the same time. So Genevieve, who you'll see shortly, moved into her roles as the Chief Executive Partner, and I moved into mine as the Head of Innovation. So I guess there was a nicety to that. Also, we'd worked together for 15 odd years prior to that. But I mean, Genevieve was appointed to that role at our firm because of her passion in relation to innovation. So I guess it was a little bit of an easier path for me coming in as Head of Innovation, because when you've got that leadership and strategy coming from the top, then you know the direction that you need to go, and it does put you in somewhat of a fortunate position to kind of navigate your way through the very many ideas that you get flooded with as you're walking through a corridor on things that we could do when it's quite clear on the path and the journey that we're going on as well. So
Yeah,
Has
and
that
just
been true for you too, at G&T? Yeah.
absolutely. So we've got complete line of sight. I mean, I work alongside our COO and Danny Gilbert as well, and everything we do is with that in mind. You know, I mentioned before when we were doing the process mapping activities, what did we do that on? I ran the matter categorisation project at the firm, and there are about 500 different matter types. We did it across 16, and that was because they accounted for 60% of revenue across the areas we really were focusing on. And everything we prioritise is with that in mind. So I will elevate, you know, particular issues or particular pain points or problems and look for solutions across the areas that are deeply strategic for the actual organisation. And I'm starting to see, I mean, certainly our work at the in-house teams, it's the exact same. They are thinking about at the moment how they really become strategic partners with the business. And to do that, I mean, I know there's a view about doing more for less. I'm not a believer of you can do more for less. You need to change the way, you know, in what you do, basically. So there is a lot of work done to prioritise the work that they should be doing, look at creative ways of, you know, outsourcing maybe the work that they, you know, don't need to be doing, you know, think about where the external counsel is, where the in-house team focuses on. So I think, yes, and that's with the corporate strategy in mind, you know, that's with their, you know, what they want to be as a legal team.
Rajesh, Denise, any additional comments there?
For us, definitely, it's not only where our innovation focus is, but it's also the work that we're not going to do, that the team says it's not strategically aligned, so how do we find a way of stopping doing that work? And we've been quite fortunate in the fact that Telstra has undergone a revamp of its strategy, T22, you've probably heard of it. We have a lot of big asks from, in a cost perspective, so everything that we do or we're currently doing in the innovation space is aligned to our strategy, and there's a clear side of it, because that's how my leadership team is being rewarded on the alignment to the strategy, and then how we deliver on that. So it's critical, and it's how you get people to buy into what you want to do, how you get support, sponsorship. It's critical.
What we've done is org charts, organizational charts, right? So this is where you have your line of command, chain of command, and everything else. So the way it works for Rajah Tann is we have regional offices. So there's Rajah Tann Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and then we have regional management council, which sits on top, and then you have all the managing partners next to it. Now, my regional managing partner in Singapore is the one who pays my salary. So remember, I wear another hat as head of the TMT law practice. That's what pays the mortgage. But having said that, my position is as part of the regional management council. So from a line standpoint, I technically sit on top of the managing partner in Singapore. Now, I give full credit to management for making a change like that, because it allows me to speak with a degree of authority across all of the officers and say, look guys, we need to do this, this and this. And the managing partners have to listen. They don't have to agree, but they have to listen because of the way in which we structured it. And I think some thinking along that line may be useful. Again, I want to be very clear that because Singapore pays me, this line is more of a dotted line than a straight hard line. Even if it were a straight line, I treat it as a dotted line. Survival instinct and all that. But that's one way in which you can make sure that you are able to speak with authority and that you have line of sight with all of the managing partners.
I think we might have time for maybe one more question. Jan is starting to move. Yeah, I know, I'm watching. A little scared, I'm watching. Fiona.
We heard before lunch that 75% of the suggestions that came through were about how to make the law firm work better. Are you trying to do anything to get your lawyers thinking in a more commercial or client-focused way so that you get some better ideas that would actually generate some new products?
So do you almost have to do a bit of education before you can kind of get the idea generation? Is that, along those lines?
Well, I think it's about having the conversation. So I think the starting point is to get the lawyers to have the conversation of what can we do better. So I think that's the first hurdle, that they're very used to saying, what other work do you need us to do, as opposed to what is a better way for us to deliver these legal services to you, and then engaging in quite a different conversation around that and empowering I guess, those lawyers and partners in those meetings to be able to talk at that level to then hopefully solve problems without each time having to be on the phone to say, I'm going out to see a client tomorrow, can you come and help me? Like that's the journey a little bit that I think we're probably all still on, that there's in different stages of that, I guess just framing questions a little bit differently and then looking for those opportunities and probably also being more in touch with not just their immediate client but the actual organisations themselves in order to draw out the opportunities, I think beyond just that legal service area as well of where law firms can support, because obviously we do have in a lot of cases, a lot more resources and a lot more specialised areas where we can offer, I guess, more broad assistance as well.
And it is that kind of more of that partnership role that we're talking about, isn't it? Which must be what you experience all the time, Denise. I mean, that really is at the core of what you do, right?
Yes, definitely. You have to create those partnerships to get stuff done. You have to get it prioritised. You have to get buy-in.
So it's all about the relationships as well as, and that's probably where the education is coming through, those relationships and that level of comfort and trust, I guess, through those partnerships, yeah.
With our firms, we look at utilising the paths that they've already taken. So, you know, G&T's on our panel. We use them quite regularly, and I'll tap into Caryn and say, hey, can you come in and talk about this, or what are you looking at that in this space? And it's creating that partnership so that both of us can have a win-win situation.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, Michelle, which I think is a really good one, we see it all the time. Our lawyers and our partners are very well versed at sort of recognising where the issues are and speaking to our clients. The challenge is then they pick up the phone to me and they say, Caryn, come and meet. So I'm encouraging now, you come with me to the meeting, you hear where the issues are so that we can actually get them upskilled in the area as well. And I'm conscious that is quite hard because they've got a day practice and I live and breathe this day in and day out. And, you know, whether it be legal tech or anything like that, the stuff, there's a lot of it and it's hard to cut through where the noise is and what's real, and it does take a lot of time. But just being sort of aware of the issues that at least they can sort of troubleshoot those ones is, I think, a journey again that we are still on. But yeah, from my perspective, certainly they are very, they're very equipped and sort of know exactly where to spot the client issues, even more so than the internal issues. They are very geared towards that. I suppose they're in the business of providing client services, so they want to pick up on those potential solutions straight away.
Fantastic. Caryn, Michelle, Denise, Rajesh, it's just been a wonderful discussion and I hope you've enjoyed it. Just an enormous amount of rich content there, thought-provoking things to take away, great case studies and practical examples of how to get some things moving forward or how to push them further forward if they're there. Thank you very much indeed. We will be giving you some wine from my personal stash over here as well, which is being depleted and I haven't been drinking it in between. So if I may, again, on your behalf, everyone, thank you very much.